Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the Red Shadow and I'm here again with another video, and today I'm doing something a little different. It's just something I thought about doing today, and I was like, may as well sit down and just film this. It's August 2nd or 3rd at this point, I believe. So obviously this video is really late, but I wasn't doing videos at the start of the year, so that's my excuse. But anyway, I wanted to sit down and highlight the 6 games that came out last year that I thought were my favorites for 2020. What I'm going to be showing in this is 3 games that were brand new for 2020. One game that I think was just brand new to consoles. It had been a PC game prior to that. And then 2 games that were like from the ground up remakes. Well, one of the other games is a remake too, and that probably gives it away, but that particular remake I feel like was a different game in some ways, and these other 2 are still this. Well, one of them's a remake and the other one is more of a remaster. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to those. But anyway, that's just to give you a little bit of a heads up on kind of like what I'm going to be talking about here. Normally I rate games for the year they came out, and if a remake or a remaster comes out later, I wouldn't normally put it up there, but I feel like these games were just well done enough to kind of warrant some official or extra exposure. Plus, it's my dumb little channel that hardly anybody is going to watch, so like I said, this is just for a chance for me to kind of talk about these games and give some thoughts, because I don't do reviews. I used to do games I've been playing style videos and highlight a game after I would beat it, and maybe that'll come back someday. I don't know. I just don't feel like I'm qualified, nor am I smart enough to sit there and do a review or like break down things like, here's the graphics, and here's the sound, and here's the gameplay, and here's the story, and here's how it matches up to other games of its genre, and all that kind of stuff. That I think there are way more capable people out there on the internet doing it at the big outlets and on smaller levels, and I just don't want to be like the guy who comes in here and tries to do that stuff too. I feel like that's one time when I am going to be compared unfavorably towards other people, and that's just sort of my anxiety issues don't do well with the idea of somebody saying, damn dude, you suck and the way you do stuff is horrible. So I'm just keeping myself out of that. If I can just sit down with a game and talk about it for a moment and say, I liked it, I didn't like it, that's cool. But to try to act like I'm some sort of a journalist who's trying to bring you some hard-hitting news, no. So anyway, enough of my normal babbling on and on about stuff. So I'm going to start, like I said, with the two titles that I think more fall under a remake remaster in that category than some of these other ones here. So the first one I want to highlight from last year is the Mafia Definitive Edition. This is basically a standard edition game, but it came with a really cool cardboard Slippy, and everybody loves a Slippy. And I had never played the Mafia games back on their original consoles. Mafia, the first Mafia game, I believe goes all the way back to the PS2. And then I think Mafia 2 was on the PS3 and that generation. And then Mafia 3 came out on PS4 and Xbox One. So I had never gotten to play this. I think I might even own the PS2 version of it, but I never have gotten a chance to get around to it. And then, surprisingly enough, this came along. 2K being the publisher, Hangar 13 being the developer. Well, as much as I liked Mafia 3, and I actually did like it, for a game that was like supposedly notoriously glitchy, I thought it was a really good game, really loved the story and stuff for it. That made me more hyped to play the first 2 games whenever I got a chance. And then last year, I don't know when the announcement was made, in 2020 or 2019, that they were going to have this definitive edition of Mafia come out. and in a remastered version of Mafia 2, but in the US it was only a digital version, so I haven't had a chance to get my hands on it. In PAL territories in Europe, they got a trilogy box set that had the definitive edition of Mafia, the remastered Mafia 2, and like a complete version of Mafia 3 in a box set. I would have loved to have gotten that, but that would have required ordering it from somewhere overseas, and I just decided that to start off with, I would get this one. So anyway, it's a Mafia game. I mean, you can't get much clearer than calling the game Mafia. But it's a really good story of a guy who ends up getting involved in the Mafia and is more of a driver type. Although the game doesn't really force you to do driving all the time, there is a race that you have to win that I found to be kind of difficult, but I got it after a few attempts. But otherwise, it reminds me a lot of Grand Theft Auto type game with a city to move around in and missions to do. Lots of on foot shooting missions, some stealth type stuff. There's collectibles and things that you can do. One thing that I think is a knock against it, and it may just be because they wanted to make the game, when they remade this remake for PS4, they rebuilt the whole game from the ground up, so it had, graphics from PS4 generation and not PS2, but it's limited. I've told many a person that if they were going to buy this game and think that it was going to be a Grand Theft Auto game where you could just get out of your car and run around and cause chaos and havoc and stuff, it's not like that. If you get out of your car during a mission, it tells you that you've left your car, you need to return to the car. And at no point in the game does it ever just pop you out into the world and then let you drive around and do whatever you want. And I thought that was a bit of a bummer. Now, there is a mode in the game, and I can't remember what it's called now, free mode, free play, exploration mode or something like that. There is a mode that lets you just drive around the town and you can explore, which is pretty fun, but there's no missions, there's no side quests, there's nothing that you can just randomly do in that other than basically drive around and explore. But it is a decent-sized map with a town and then surrounding areas. Like you can be driving in the countryside, and there's a lot of things to go and collect. I think you can go pick up collectibles in that free mode, and I believe there are trophies that are tied into collecting all the stuff in the game. I don't remember because I was thinking I was going to do that after I finished the game. But sometimes I'm just like, it's time to go play the next thing, and I will set a game down and not touch it again for a while. So maybe something that I go back to. Also, I'm not really going to rank these games. This isn't like bottom, number 6 of the 6 games. It's just one of the ones I wanted to mention, and because this was not originally released for PS4, it's a remake of the prior game, I wanted to touch on a couple of those games first. But I do think it's really, really good fun, and if you understand that it's not free open world to move around in like Grand Theft Auto, and you understand that you'll play the game and go through the missions, I think most people will enjoy this game and the story. The story is really interesting. Like I said, it's a mafia game, and you're a guy who gets pulled into the mafia and does some driving stuff and other things, and you work your way up through the ranks, and I mean, that's it. But I'm not trying to minimize the story. It is a good story, and I enjoyed it a lot. All right, so the next game that I want to talk about, now this game is more of a remaster than a remake. This game wasn't rebuilt from the ground up and popped onto this generation or the PS4, Xbox One generation of consoles. It was instead ported over, but visually enhanced in ways to make it a little bit more, suitable for people who don't like playing older console games. This game only goes back to like PS3, Xbox 360, and I had this for 360. I played some of it back when it first came out, and as I think a lot of us do, sometimes you play a game, you sample it, you're like, this is pretty fun, but I want to check out something else now. I'm not ready to commit time to this game. I'll come back to it. Well, that's what happened with me. I bought it for 360. I enjoyed it, but I was like, I'm going to play some other stuff and we'll go back to it. And then I ended up going back like 7, 8, 9 years later. So anyway, this is Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning. The original title was Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. And this game here is published by THQ Nordic, the company that went over the last few years and bought up a bunch of old properties from companies that didn't exist anymore. This game was originally developed by, the symbol is very small there, but Big Huge Games, a company that was founded solely or mostly by Curt Schilling, a baseball pitcher. I love baseball. Curt Schilling played for a couple teams I didn't care for, and my thoughts on the guy as an individual aren't too high, but the idea that some guy in baseball was such a video game lover that he wanted to create his own company and make his own game was applaudable. The whole entire thing surrounding this game, though, is a debacle, and I don't know all of the facets of it because it's very... There's so much stuff going on in it, but basically I believe that his company secured funding to create their studio and make a game from the state of Rhode Island. A large amount of money was given to them by the state of Rhode Island as, I guess, like a loan or something that they pretty much guaranteed the state of Rhode Island that they would be able to give it back to them. And the game, a game which I love and think was amazing, didn't meet expectations, didn't make that money back, caused a bunch of problems. I believe they all got sued by the state of Rhode Island. I believe that's basically what killed their game company and any future games they had planned. I've heard that both there was going to be a sequel to this and that there was going to be an online MMORPG based on this world. And then, of course, those fell apart because the company faced a bunch of problems. But speaking of MMORPGs, the reason why Curt Schilling and his friends and partners came together to make this game, made this game, was because they loved games back in the 2000s that were MMORPGs like World of Warcraft and other online role-playing games like that. But they wanted to make their own game. Whether it was the original intention or not, this is a single-player MMORPG, basically. It plays very much like it. The worlds are designed much like a MMORPG's world would be. Big, spacious areas full of things to do. A fantasy storyline that will carry you through quite a bit of time. I just want to give some context into like how much I enjoyed this game. I'm pretty sure this is one of the games I put the most time into for a single playthrough. This game, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but this game, as far as I know, maybe people have noticed this, maybe they haven't, but you'll go into a game and you'll play and you'll be like, I wonder how long I've been playing this game. And usually you can pause the game or go to your save file and you can see a ticker that shows how many hours you've put into it. Sometimes those games pause that time frame when you're on the pause screen, and sometimes they don't. I don't believe that this one pauses the time when you pause the game, but I had almost 200 hours on my save file for this when I beat the game. Now, the reason why I brought up the pause thing, excuse me, there were quite a few nights when I'd like come home from work and I didn't have to work the next day, and I'd eat and then I'd sit down to play this. And maybe an hour, 2, 4 hours in, I'd get sleepy. And knowing that I didn't have to work the next day, I wouldn't be like, well, let's shut it all off, turn the lights out, roll over, go to bed. Sometimes I'd just be like, yeah, I can just kind of lay down and take a nap or whatever, or just sleep for a little while with the game on the screen, on the pause screen, and it would be ticking off the hours a little bit. So I just tried to do a guesstimate of how much of that almost 200 hours could have been spent on pause screens here and there. And so I came down to believing that I probably put upwards of about 175 hours into this game last year. And that was over, I want to say, from when I beat the game before it, and I usually try to start the next game right afterwards, it was about 5 to maybe 6 weeks. So 5 to 6 weeks, 175 hours in this game. So like I said, needless to say, I did enjoy this game quite a bit. So let's mention something. I want to read this directly off the back of the case, so you'll understand the pedigree of people who are working on this game. As I mentioned Curt Schilling before, he was just the guy who created this company to make this game. He wasn't making the game itself. It says here, from the minds of the best-selling author R.A. Salvatore. So I believe that guy has written a lot of fantasy-style books and maybe some sci-fi stuff. Because I want to say maybe he wrote some of the Star Trek Next Generation books that I read back in the 90s. I could be wrong. But his name definitely sounds familiar amongst things that I have actually read. Spawn creator Todd McFarlane, who I believe the reason why he was a part of that was having something to do with the character designs and artwork and stuff. And Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion lead designer Ken Ralston. Comes Kingdoms of Amalur: Re-Reckoning. Remastered with stunning visuals and refined gameplay, Re-Reckoning delivers intense, customizable RPG combat inside a sprawling game world. Like I said, the pedigree behind this game has always been impressive to me. I enjoyed it. Like I said, it plays very much like a World of Warcraft game, only with, controller-styled controls. A lot of melee, but there's magic and all that kind of stuff. And I believe it lets you make a warrior class or a magic class or whatever. And I always just go for the guy with the big sword that's hitting shit. Very, very fun game. Has some glitches from the original game that were ported into this version still. That's a shame when they don't fix stuff from the original game. And if you're not aware of it, you can get screwed at some times. I got a little bit messed up, but thankfully the save system was liberal enough that I could recover from it and not lose a bunch of time in it. And I would certainly recommend that if you're into, your fantasy world style games. You will get your money's worth out of it for sure. I believe it came out at $40, and by this point it's probably cheaper. Okay, so my next game from last year that I was really, really into, before we get into the big three, I'll call them, and this one was kind of a surprise, but boy, I really, really enjoyed this game. This is the one that I think was available on PC prior to it coming out on console last year, but this is House Flipper. Buy, renovate, sell is what it says on the front there. Those are aspects of it, but the renovate part is the big part of this. It's a simulator game. Think of firefighter simulator or flight simulator or even the goofy goat simulator, because this does have a lot of humor involved with it. It's whimsical. It's not meant to be super serious. It's meant to be something that you just kind of have some fun with. It says on the back, buy, repair, and improve devastated homes, give them a second life, and sell them for a profit, which is true, but the profit doesn't really do much for you. Like, you can buy the cheapest house, renovate it, make some money to buy to the next house. You can get a lot of money out of the game near the end, but it does have an end. You do come to a point where there's no more houses to buy and renovate, and all you can really do is just kind of go back in and redo certain houses in different ways. I'm horrible with the creative stuff like this. It's why I've never really gotten into Minecraft and a lot of those building style games. But there was just something about this game. When I played it, it was just the perfect, I want to say it came out in like August of last year. It was just the perfect time. After I'd played the games I'm going to show here next, I'm kind of waiting for the next big thing to come along. This was a perfect chill game. This is a chill game, a zen game, whatever you want to call it, when it's sort of mindless and just doesn't have grinding. It doesn't have difficult enemies, because it has no enemies. It's just literally walk into this house, pick up a mop or a hammer and clean or knock something down, go into your creative menu and see what you can build. A lot of times you'll see potential buyers and they'll say, this is what I need. If I remember right, I think the main story of the game, it has you fulfilling the wishes of an AI controlled buyer that's like, I need to have a house that has this many bedrooms and this many bathrooms. We have kids, or we're not going to be living here for very long. We just want kind of like a rad place to hang out. And so you build the house accordingly. You see who wants to buy it and who's going to give you the most amount of money. And that's how you make more money, is making sure that you tick off all the little proverbial boxes that the buyer wants. And I just enjoyed going in and, like I said, being able to walk up to a wall with a hammer, a sledgehammer, and basically knock it all down, knock the pieces down, and then rebuild the walls however you want. Put whatever you want on the floor, paint the wall whatever color you want, and you have furnishing options. And some of the houses were really cool. Some of them were like Easter egg style houses, so I don't think this is a spoiler, but I guess if you didn't want to know about it, then don't listen here for a moment. But at one point, the house that you go into to renovate and do stuff in is the house from the first Home Alone movie. Now, I haven't watched Home Alone, but I've seen so much stuff about it over the years. It's a meme at this point about some of the stuff, the recognizable aspects of their house, the staircase where the paint can comes down and whatnot. And so in that house, you actually have to clean up afterwards. You have to clean up the paint and stuff that's been knocked over. I don't know how faithful and true it is to the movie, but I know that it's steeped in Home Alone 1 lore. So this is a really cool little game. If you like that kind of stuff, I would definitely say this is something to check out. If you're not creative like me, and you're worried about it, then maybe watch a video about it or something. Like I said, I'm not creative, but I found fixing, cleaning, renovating the houses for those customers to be fun enough. It carried me all the way through to the end. When I started messing around with houses and being like, I'm going to make my fantasy house, I sort of found myself at the end kind of being unsatisfied with what I could do, but that wasn't the fault of House Flipper. So anyway, and there's like DLC for this, including like adding gardening, basically stuff you can put in your yard, because you couldn't really do much in the yard in this game. So I'm hoping to either be like a complete edition of this later, or I'll just have to get the DLC at some point, because it looked like a whole lot of fun. All right, so now we're going to be coming up on the big 3 here. This will be my first chance to really talk about these games. So these I'm going to roughly show you in the order of like a 3-2-1 order, but all of these games, in my opinion, were really good. They all get basically a score of 9 out of 10 for me, so I just have to kind of decide, which is my favorite, which is in the middle, which is my least favorite of the 9 out of 10s. And so we're going to start with Ghosts of Tsushima, or Tsushima. I still don't know that I've heard a definitive pronunciation of it, but this was the new game from Sucker Punch, the guys behind the Infamous series, and I believe they were the guys between Sly Cooper. I might be wrong about that, because I haven't really played the Sly Cooper games, but I have played Infamous Second Son and a little bit of the original Infamous game. But this game is so completely different from what they were doing over there. This is a samurai game. Late 13th century ruthless Mongol army invades Tsushima in a quest to conquer all of Japan, but for Jin Sakai, the guy on the cover, the one you play as, one of the last surviving samurai defenders, the battle has just begun. Set aside samurai tradition and forge a new path. The path of the ghost, as you wage an unconventional war for the freedom of Japan. So while it is a samurai game, it allows you to do things that samurai would normally do. And I think that's kind of cool, because you can also kind of forego all the sneaky, stealthy assassin stuff for the most part. It does require you in some missions to do that stuff. I think that was a common complaint for some, was that either let you go one way or another or both, but don't force you to do things on one side if you didn't want to do them that way. To me, who cares, man? It was just a really, really fun game, a really beautiful game. I got the special edition here. The special edition mainly entails of a DLC voucher, a digital mini art book, some in-game items, Hero of Tsushima in-game skin set, director's commentary. But honestly, the main reason why I got it was just because it's a steelbook. And the steelbook is, it may not come across very well on the camera. There seems like there's a light glare that's popping up there, but it's a very basic but still really cool looking steelbook case. And then inside there's the little sheet that has the code on the back and the disc. But yeah, a whole lot of fun to be had in this. This year there's a director's cut, because that seems to be a new PS5 branding. There's like a director's cut of Ghost of Tsushima that's coming out that's going to have an expansion part to it. Ishi Island or something to that effect. Something that I've read basically like will occur during the course of the game. So I don't know if it would be better to play it while you're playing the game, or if someone like me were to be able to just play that after having played this, if it would make any sense. But I don't know, like this was a game that where the story was interesting and kept me moving. It was the gameplay, it was the beauty of the world, the traversal, the little things that you could do. Some of the character kind of stuff was interesting to me, but a lot of times I'm driven by the story and the characters, and sometimes I'm like, the story and the characters are great, but just playing the game is really, really fun and interesting, and that's what Ghost of Tsushima ended up being for me. So that's the first of the big three games. The next one up here, and this might actually kind of pain me a little bit to say that this wasn't my favorite game of last year, because it's a very important game to me. But anyway, that's Final Fantasy VII Remake. This, once again, well, this is the deluxe edition. Love how all of these special editions, deluxe edition, collector's editions, director's cut. This was the deluxe edition for Final Fantasy VII Remake. And this is, just for a little peek inside the box here. So you get your standard copy of the game, complete with the not for resale mark that comes on the ones that are in these box sets. There's a deluxe edition art book. This kind of stuff is always fun for me, but usually only like I'll just take a look at it once or twice, and then, you know, I'll just kind of like put it to the side. Especially before playing a game, like I don't really want to look at the art book for something until I've had a chance to play the game and see all the stuff for myself. You also get a mini soundtrack, and the mini soundtrack has 12 tracks on it. I do believe there was a full expanded official soundtrack, and I did try to look into getting it, but I just never did. And then we got a steelbook, another steelbook. Steelbooks are really awesome, and they usually have like nice art, but I feel like most people are either going to want to display the steelbook, or maybe even go ahead and put the game discs into the steelbook and put those on the shelf. And I don't like to put them on the shelf unless that's the only way the game came. When they come in a box set like this, I just leave them in the box. Happy to know that they're always there, but not really my thing to display them. Maybe it's just because I don't have a great way to display them. But I like this bad boy, this fat, badass dude to sit on my shelf instead. So, anyway, enough blathering about that. Final Fantasy VII Remake. Okay, I guess maybe spoilers for my top 30 games of all time list, but Final Fantasy VII is my favorite game ever. When the remake was announced back in 2015, 7 years or 6 years ago at this point, I was stoked because it was something that I'd always wanted. When the idea of remaking a game or updating it and bringing it to newer consoles when a game had been out, especially, at this, like, still at that point, almost 20 years since it had been released, people had been clamoring for it for a long time, and Square had been really, really hesitant about ever doing it. And then all of a sudden, there it was, E3 2015. I did a video about that on my channel several years ago about how E3 2015 had made a liar out of me. I had been telling my friends and even customers at Walmart when I was there that I had no intention of ever buying a PlayStation 4. I was not going to get into the new console generation. Too many day one patches and too many internet required and always online games. Microtransactions were horrible. Day one DLC on disc. Games that were basically just multiplayer. I mean, that's kind of the online only kind of stuff, but it was just too much of a focus on all that kind of stuff, and I just hated it. It was really turning me off to the gaming industry. It was really turning me off to being a gamer, to being a collector. It just felt like the industry as a whole, and I get it, game publishers and all companies, the people who made my TV, the people who made my fan that's sitting here, people who made this chair I'm sitting in and this camera that I'm recording with, and YouTube, like, everything is out to get your money. They want you to buy their products. They want to make something that you will consume in some way. They're not just going to give it to you for free. And the games are the same way. People want to make amazing games, but the companies that they work for want to make money off of it. They want to make it hand over fist. So I was turned off by just how over the top and in your face all of that shit had gotten to be. And I was turned off, and I was burnt out, and I was upset. And so I just decided, no, there's no way I'm buying a PS4 or any other of the new consoles, and I'm done. And I've felt that way for I had to have been a good year and a half to 2 years, from basically when any talk of PS4, Xbox One generation was coming out to them eventually releasing. And then, like I said, that was the very tail end of 2013, and it was June of 2015 before I saw something that made me want to invest in those consoles after all. Final Fantasy VII Remake, Shenmue 3 Kickstarter, and The Return of the Last Guardian. And February of 2016, I bought my PS4. I've had that now for, 5.5 years at this point. Yes, 5.5 years. And it's mind-blowing. It's my largest library of games in my collection at this point. I'm almost to 600 games for PS4. But some of that is because of what I just said. I was going to be done. I allowed that particular gen of consoles to lure me back in with the promise of games that were really exciting to me. And I've been, like, no disappointment whatsoever in the PS4 generation. But the game industry is still the way that it is. I know I'm going on and on about this, so I apologize for that. But I guess I'm kind of trying to set the table for where I'm going with this, that this game is really, really good. And I really, really love it. It tugged at my heartstrings. It gave me all the feels. It reminded me so much about why I love the original game. The reason why I own the original Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1, obviously. But I also have it on Steam. I have digital version on my PS4. This is the original, version of the game. And now I have the remake. And I'm looking forward to the further parts of it, even though they're probably going to be on consoles that I don't own and may never own. But it's also okay that I may never play them. Because This is like a new class of what you might consider a remake, because a remake should usually be pretty faithful to the original game in terms of story and gameplay, rebuilt graphics, and you can tweak and better the controls. And like in this one of the things that they do is there's a heavy emphasis on it being action RPG controls as opposed to turn-based, even though you can turn it to turn-based. But they also did one thing that I had absolutely no idea they were going to do, and that's that they altered the story. It's almost like instead of it being a remake, they decided to create an alternate universe, an alternate retelling of the story that acknowledges that it is a retelling of the story. There are certain elements in the game that are literally, in my opinion, in the opinion of a lot of people I've seen online, these elements are in there to sort of acknowledge that the story is different. The story will be different. The story is meant to be different, and that's part of the story. That there are things, there are fates that either try to change things in the original story or try to protect them from being changed, but you end up changing them. It's very confusing. It's very Square Enix. It's very, maybe not quite as convoluted as a Kingdom Hearts game, but it's getting there. And so by having characters that you know and love and like expanding on them, but also having them show up in different times or in different ways, it's a little jolting. It's a little abrupt. It's a little disconcerting, and it's what keeps it from being a 10 out of 10 in my book, because a remake of my favorite game of all time, for the most part, unless a developer just completely breaks the game, you would think that you would love any kind of an improvement on the original. But for them to actually take the creative liberty to say, no, the story's going to be a little different. It's going to deviate from what you remember, and it's going to be like self-aware of its changes, that's what holds it back for me. But where I've seen a ton of people on the internet get really upset and be like, no, you're ruining Final Fantasy VII and you've completely destroyed it. All I can say to them is, what are you talking about? What are you on about? Final Fantasy VII, the game that we all know and love from the PS1, quite often considered amongst the top video games of all time. Like, for a massive majority. I know a lot of people think it's overhyped and overrated and overdone, but it's still a majority of people who played this game consider it to be one of the best. It has not changed. It's still there for you. You can still play it at any time that you want to, through so many different ways. You don't have to play this game. You don't have to. If you didn't like this, or didn't like the look of it, if you didn't like a review of it that somebody that you trust said something about it, you don't have to play it. Don't be disappointed about it. The old game is not gone. It's still there. Remember that it's still there. Go back and play it whenever you want. I get people not wanting to play this, period. I get people playing this and coming out on the other side of it disappointed. I can see and understand that. I still loved it. It's like a companion piece. It's like an art book or a strategy guide or a soundtrack. It enhances the original, but you don't have to base this remake game on its own. You can just be like, yeah, it's really kind of cool. If you're the type who likes to read fan fiction about anything that you play or watch or love, then just consider it something like that. But I just, like I said, I refuse to shit on it and waste a bunch of energy that's just negative energy on something that there's just no point in it. It's really, really fun. It was, like I said, a 9 out of 10 game for me from last year. Touched on a lot of the things that I wanted to see from it. I just scratched my head a little bit at sort of retelling the tale in different ways. But maybe down the road with whatever other installments come out for this, maybe it'll end up being a really fantastic way of changing the story. Or maybe it'll just suck. Who knows? But so far I'm good with it. But as far as the way that it pertains to me as a Final Fantasy VII lover, it's non-offensive and very, like I said, it's very it's a great companion piece that kind of enhances it in the original in a really cool way. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. So we'll move on to the last one, which is another game that produces a lot of thoughts from a lot of people. So if you know the games that came out in 2020 and the ones that had people talking, you've probably figured out by now, but this is The Last of Us Part 2. Once again, I got a special edition. The special edition on this one is pretty much just game and art book. There's the art book for Last of Us Part 2. Just show you a couple of pages from inside of here. Got some clickers and some creatures going on. There's some... Here's the thing to me about art books, especially games from now. Games from the current time, art books don't do a lot of justice to... I love this old style PlayStation insignia on the back of this. But art books don't do a whole lot of justice to the games anymore, because games are just fantastic, beautiful. Been watching some stuff about Red Dead 2 today. Just reminded when the original trailers came out just how beautiful that game looked, and then playing them and realizing that yes, it's fantastic. Games like this, like some of this artwork in this book is really, really cool, but the game was one of the best looking games I think that's ever been released. So anyway, just my thoughts on that. This special edition, the other thing that comes with it, in addition to the art book, is a steel book. You got Ellie on the front, and everybody's favorite Abby on the back. And then there's the contents inside, the 2 discs. This is the sheet with the DLC code. It was network avatars, a dynamic theme, digital soundtrack, digital mini art book from Dark Horse. The actual art book is from Dark Horse as well. This has a play disc and a data disc. That's why there's 2 discs for it. Also, it mentions having a theme in here for your PlayStation. I have 4 or 5 Last of Us Part 2 themes on my console. It's hilarious how many I have for this one game. Every time I saw one, I got it, because I think all of them were free. This one comes with the game, but the other ones I got were free here and there. Excuse me, I don't think I paid for any of them. I also have a few themes for Final Fantasy VII Remake as well, and a Ghost of Tsushima one. So anyway, I think maybe I'm stalling on this because, man, this game has divided people in unbelievable ways, and I'm going to speak about that here. So, I guess my favorite game of last year, despite the last 3 games all having 9 out of 10s, I think overall this one just nudges the other ones out of the way. Ghost of Tsushima, beautiful, fantastic looking and playing, fluid game. Final Fantasy VII Remake, bringing back the feels and the memories while changing some things, leaving me scratching in my head a little bit. This game, beautiful, plays really well, makes some decisions that make a lot of other people scratch their heads. Didn't make me, though. So I guess everything from here on for the rest of the video could probably be considered spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled on it, if you didn't hear the leaks about the game before it came out that really riled everybody up in the first place, then you may want to skip the rest of this if you're not interested in any of that. If you played it and you have thoughts, well then stick around. But where to begin? I don't have an issue with any of the major plot points in this game that have set the internet on fire and gamers across the world and caused people to send death threats to Neil Druckmann and people on the team. Now, I understand there's controversy with all these companies at this point, but like Naughty Dog has had their fair pay issues, and I feel like that's mostly what they've had is like crunch and not paying people equally, and all that stuff sucks. But I'm just little old me down here playing games, and I know that everybody says, the best way to deal with those problems as a consumer is to, speak with your wallet. But I don't know. Like, if a game comes along I want to play, I'm going to buy it. And if I hear that a company has been shitty, that's going to make me hesitant. And sometimes I wait until a game gets cheaper before I throw any money at it. And of course, a lot of people say buy the games used, and that way the people who you're upset with and that everybody else are upset with won't see that money, only the money for the person who bought it at first. I don't know. I don't want to wade into all that shit because I'm not into the drama and all that kind of stuff. I'm not an activist. I'm not going to sit out there and petition against all these games over the different things that's going on by the people in their company. I'll leave that to more important people, more strong-willed people who can make their points more clearly. A lot of the people I watch online have been talking about these things here lately, so I don't want to get into that part of it. I guess I'm just wanting to let people know I'm aware of this shit. So if I justify or defend somebody else is going to come out and be like, don't do that, this is just why. So, as I said before, spoilers. If you've stuck around to this point, I guess I really haven't spoiled anything, but I'm going to now. So if you played the first Last of Us, that's one of my favorite games. Joel and Ellie, amazing characters, all the people around them who were in the first game, the ones who survived and made it through, the ones who died along the way. Emotional story, very questionable ending in terms of the decision that Joel made to save Ellie as opposed to allowing her death and her sacrifice to save potentially everybody who was left in the days of the outbreak, and did it for his selfish reason because he had lost his daughter at the beginning of the outbreak, and Ellie, he grew to love and care for her and think of her as a daughter, a new daughter in his life, and he saved her life to kind of quell that thing inside of him of being destroyed by the death of his own child. I thought that was a hell of an ending. Morally probably not right, but a lot of people would probably do it. If I was in that situation, I'm not going to say right now that I would not have made the decision that he did. I'd say there's a really good chance that I might have done exactly what he did. I don't ever want to be in that situation where I'd have to make that decision. But it's a video game, so it allows you to think about those kinds of things, but it also allows you to put the controller down and turn the console off and go about with your life and not get so, excuse me for the swearing, I mean, I swear sometimes here and there, but I'll probably swear a lot here, but go on with your fucking life, get over yourself, and stop being the kind of person that I'm going to be describing here in a bit. So everybody loved Papa Joel. I referred to him as that last summer when, before the game, not having really heard a lot of spoilers, but kind of understanding a little bit about what was going to happen, playing the game and seeing it, after the game, thinking about it, talking to people that I knew. I was at Walmart last summer and was working with a lot of younger people who are into video games. This one particular girl, she really, really enjoyed the game, the first game, and she was super ready for the second game. But she kind of laughed when I called him Papa Joel, and when we talked about the point in part 2 that happens relatively early in the game. Let me try to talk about that. So I talked about the ending of the first game where he saves Ellie and takes her to in the town in Wyoming where his brother had been with a bunch of people and kind of created their own little new city. He takes her back there, and they're going to, just start hopefully a regular life there. Tells her that the Fireflies had, he told her that they'd had many people who were immune, but none of them had been able to produce any kind of a cure. Nothing had come of her being immune, and they were out of there. Joel didn't tell Ellie that that wasn't the case, that he busted away from them, killed a bunch of them to stop them from killing her, to dissect her brain and see why she was immune, and maybe create a cure for this fungal outbreak. And he shoots, including a character that Ellie had known and considered to be like a good close friend, someone who was caring for her when Ellie's mother had died years prior. Joel shoots her dead, shoots a doctor dead at the operating table, takes her out. Feeds her the lie, they go on with their life. Last of Us Part 2 picks up a couple years later. She's now like 19 years old, where she was like 14 in the first game. And they're all living happily in their, fortified town in Wyoming. And they go and do runs and security sweeps of the area around their town to check for clickers and runners and all the different infected people, as well as like bandits and anybody who might be trying to steal from them, but also looking for survivors and people who they can trust and bring into their community. And in the game, Tommy and Joel, the brothers, are together. Ellie is with a girl named Dina, who's revealed to be a love interest for her. And then there's some other people patrolling around as well. Well, there's this group that has come. You find out later they've come from like Seattle area to Wyoming to find Joel. But you don't know why at first. This group is kind of led, or at least you get control of this girl named Abby. And she's this unusual lady, and I'm going to address it. Some people were, if anything, more than anything at all, just making fun of the fact that she's like this. She's really buff, like big arms, and she's kind of ripped for a girl who in a lot of ways is kind of the same height and size as Ellie. And people have been dissecting what this means. Like, for someone to be like that, they'd have to be working out, they'd have to be eating right, and everybody's like, where could you work out like that? Where could you eat that kind of food in this? What the fuck does it matter? It's a fucking story. It's fictional. Everything that I will be talking about in this is prefaced by this point. It's fictional. Who gives a shit? I love realism in games. Red Dead 2 with its slow and sometimes monotonous pace, but it's very realistic. Lots of games are loaded with that realism in it, but you don't want it to be too much, and you have to suspend the disbelief. You have to just be like, okay, sure. I don't know why the internet Einsteins have to pop out every time they're just a slight bit butthurt over some little thing in a game. This topic gets me really mad, and I'm in a definitive minority here in this. Most people are mad over the stuff I'm going to talk about, and I'm mad that people are so mad over this. It's so stupid. These guys don't exist. Take your frustrations out on things that are legitimate injustices in the world, not a fucking video game. Anyway, back on track. You take control of this Abby girl, and she gets kind of mad with some of her companions, one in particular, and splits off from them and kind of goes out on her own to find the people she's looking for. And the game, Naughty Dog, makes you control her at that point. Not knowing what she's about, not really knowing what she's up to, you actually take control of this character and play her for a little while. And this culminates with her being rescued by Joel and Tommy and being chased by a bunch of the clickers and the infected into like this ski resort. But they make their way out of it, and they go to the place where Abby's group has gotten together, like a house out in the woods. And when you get there, and Abby is kind of bringing Joel and Tommy to the rest of her crew, they end up in a room, and almost immediately Joel and Tommy know that something's going on, and then somebody shoots Joel in the leg with a shotgun, wrecks his fucking leg, and then they put him down, and Abby gets a golf club and goes to town on him. And here's one of the big things that people are very, very upset about. Because Joel is so fucking precious to some of these people, having him go into a scenario like this when he was a survivor for 20 years, when he'd grappled with doing some of the shittiest things that he could do, including killing people to survive, they're like, how could he be lulled into this situation? How could he be in that situation? Well, first of all, here's my answer. I don't know. And you don't know either. Who cares? Everybody goes in, well, the story is not good if these kinds of things aren't addressed like this. I don't know. Like, is it really that big of a deal, though? Ultimately, people are blaming it on, well, the story's no good if it doesn't work out like this. I'm there to partake in whatever book, movie, TV show, game, etc. that I sit down in front of. And I will tell you, sure, I can understand when somebody who's probably like 10 years old is trying to write a cohesive story, and I can be like, it's kind of iffy, I'm not really that into it. But when grown adults who have a track record of doing things and writing things do something, I'm not going to sit here and be like, man, this story sucks. I don't like this story. It's a horrible story. Bad story. No, you're just upset because of the things that are happening in this game. I guarantee you, people are just upset because Joel gets wailed on by this golf club, by this Abby girl, and is killed, left for dead and killed. Well, not left for dead. He's killed. He's dead right in front of Ellie, because Ellie gets to that point as they're doing this and sees it happen. Now, see, what I saw in the story there was, yeah, it sucked. Papa Joel, man. Papa Joel. I love Papa Joel. But he got killed there, and that's happened. That happens. That's the story, guys. He got killed early on in the game. You know, several years of having some happiness and a relationship that was still tumultuous with Ellie. He got killed in that moment, and that's a bummer. But that's what I feel like they were trying to tell you in the story was, yeah, man, no holds barred here. Things are going to happen. Shit's going to go down. And Joel takes the hit from it. I saw people speculating before this game even came out that Joel was dead by the time the story started. Would you have been more satisfied with the story if it had been an off-camera thing and you didn't know exactly what happened, or it was a flashback or something? I think it was just like, oh, we got Joel back, and oh man, I hope we get to play as him at some point in the game. What? He's getting beat up with a golf club and now he's fucking dead? I'm pissed. So he dies, and Ellie, despite the ups and downs they've been having in their relationship, Ellie is traumatized. And that's the story here. I can't remember exactly where it was said, and I'm probably going to mess it up a little bit, but somebody said that the first game was based around the concept of love. The love that Joel had for his daughter, the love that develops for Ellie as a replacement or a surrogate daughter, the love that she has for Joel at the end, the scene when they're in the house and she had run off and she's reading the diary and saying all this shit, and she says, everybody has left me, everybody except fucking you, and pushes him. And then he makes that horrible comment of, he's like, or she said, I'm not like her, I'm not like your daughter. I'm not going to do this thing, and that thing's not going to happen. And then later he says, you're right, you're not like my daughter, and I'm not your dad. Oh, it was gut-wrenching, but then he pulls it back out there a little while later. The theme of that first game was love. And the theme in this second game, I read somewhere, or maybe even Neil Druckmann said it somewhere, or somebody interviewing him said him, someone interviewing him said it, that this game was about hate / revenge. And I mean, it's so very, very obvious. Ellie loved Joel, no matter what had happened between them. Ellie was like a fuse was lit inside her when Abby killed Joel. When Joel was gone, that happiness that they'd had for a few years, I think the reason why their relationship was tumultuous, in addition to her like being a teenager and growing up, was also her not knowing if she could really trust him. She still didn't really fully trust what he had said about the Fireflies. But she still loved him at the core of everything. She still loved him. And when he died, that inflamed her. That just enraged her. And then the way that Abby's revenge and hate drove her to come find Joel. I know I haven't gotten to why, but she was fueled by revenge and hate. Now Ellie is fueled by revenge and hate to find Abby and kill Abby for what she's done. And there's a lot of symbolism in that. In my opinion, there's a lot of symbolism in that about the futility of that kind of stuff. How far is too far? What is enough? How far should you go in a situation like this? And I think it's an important question to ask. I think that's what makes the story about it amazing. Sacrifices will be made, but they're fictional characters. Try to figure out what the story is about in this, and then maybe you would kind of understand it a little bit better. That's what I went through with it. I just was like, it sucked that Joel died, but it's for the sake of the story. Now Ellie is going to go on a tear. She's going to kind of become the Joel of all those years when he was trying to survive. The fucking vicious cycle that just keeps going and keeps going. Because you'll spend a bunch of the game now pursuing Abby and her group, trying to find them. But then you also have moments where you go back to Abby and you play again as her. Oh my God, the first time that you play as Abby after she's killed Joel, you just like want to throw the controller through the TV screen. I felt that way. I was like, are you really going to make me play as her now after what had happened? But then I realized that it was fucking brilliant. It was putting you in her shoes. The whole game is trying to do its best to make you feel uncomfortable with how Ellie is turning sadistic almost, and turning into Joel, who was a sadistic character that you came to love. Now you're playing as a character that you love, but the story is trying to make you kind of like hate her a little bit. You don't have to hate her. If it doesn't work on you that way, fine. If you don't like the story for that, if you're just like, this doesn't, I don't feel comfortable with this, cool. But to just blame it on bad writing, I think is a cop-out on the fact of these, on the part of these people who are just struggling because Papa Joel got killed. So you play as Ellie and you start pursuing Abby. You go back and you play as Abby and you learn a bit more about her. At some point in a mid to late part of the game, you find out that Abby's dad was the doctor that Joel killed at the hospital where they were going to, sacrifice Ellie and try to figure out why she was immune to create a cure. That was the driving point of it all. Now, they retconned something in there that it was a little bit too blatant for me, and so I was a little turned off by that, but it was just a little nitpick. They made the doctor look like a different person in Last of Us Part 2 when they do a flashback of that moment than the doctor that you killed in the first game. Just to serve, because if I remember right, the doctor was kind of an older guy in The Last of Us. In Last of Us Part 2, they tried to make him look more like a guy who had a teenage daughter at the time that occurred. But that was a driving impetus for Abby to look after these people. Her father was struck down in the middle of trying to do something that would have helped the remaining population. And the revenge, the hate and the revenge built in her until she could exact that revenge on the guy who did it. And she didn't want to go through and mow down everybody in their town in Wyoming. She didn't want to kill Tommy, who was right there with him. She didn't want to kill Abby, or Abby didn't want to kill Ellie. even though she had to have known that Ellie was the person that Joel killed her father over. So it was very, very interesting the way that there was so many cycles and so many characters changing, and you were learning these stories and how comparable they were to one another. But everybody was just like, look at Abby, she's all built, she looks like a dude with a woman's head on her. And there was also, when the leaks happened and people found out stuff like Joel was going to die, they also found out about a trans character that was in the game. And I think everybody immediately thought the trans character was Abby because she was big and buff, and the hatred and intolerance and just horrible nastiness of so much of the human population reared its head. Well, hey, guess what, guys? When you feel shit like that, you're no better than these characters that kill everybody just to survive. Like, in my opinion, really, it's a video game character. I'm not comparing somebody's hatred and intolerance, like racism and sexism, to somebody who kills and slaughters people in real life. But if you're upset about, if your prejudices come through over a fictional character that kills somebody that isn't real and you don't really actually know, I think those kind of things could be on par. So anyway, by the end of this game, whether you like it or not, whether the writing was good enough for you or not, they tried to make you look at Ellie as a bit of unfavorable, that she was going out of hand, that the revenge was driving her past all the other things that she knew, people that she loved in her life who were still with her. And Abby, they were trying to make her a little bit more of a likable character. Whether she was or not is up to you. There's a part in the game where you're playing as Abby and you're fighting against Ellie. And I kind of had a feeling I knew where things were going to go in the game. So I stood there for like 10 attempts as Abby and just let Ellie's computer-controlled Ellie kill Abby. Just over and over again. Kind of like as a catharsis. To just see some sort of revenge. Because even in my mind, I was like, she deserves some sort of revenge. This is kind of the video game trope. You killed somebody that I love, now I kill you. So I let the game kind of do it, and then I got that out of my system, and I was like, now let's see where the story actually goes. And by the end of the story, Ellie was so driven by her revenge that she basically lost everybody that she loved, whether they were dead or just she left them behind, and they were like, okay, you do you, but now I'm going to go take care of my own self. That happened with Dina, and in some ways I feel like it even kind of happened like with Tommy and Tommy's wife and stuff. Just sort of like, we got, you're out of hand now, we've done all we could, let's just live. But Ellie had to have closure of some sort. And Abby had ended up going through some amazing, like, hardcore shit to her at the end of it. The last time that you see her in the game, she's so withered, and I wonder too, like, she's all big and buff. At the end, she's so broken, weak, vulnerable. Her muscle definition is gone. Her hair is frazzled. Her face, she almost looks like a meth addict would look after you see their before and after pictures. And I think they wanted to just show what happens and how people change. And I don't know, like I said, this is where I'm not really qualified to say a whole lot about trying to dig the philosophical shit out of it. But Ellie and Abby fight, and in the end, like right before Ellie could have killed Abby, I believe, if I remember correctly, there's a scene where you kind of where they show Joel for a moment, and I think Ellie just finally realizes at that moment that she's gone way too far. She lets Abby go. And I think there were a lot of people who are also like, that's out of character for her. That's not the way that she would act, the way they were talking about Joel. Joel wouldn't be lulled into these situations. He's a fighter. He's a survivor. Like, you don't know these people like you think you know these people. There's a lot of things all across creative everything, creative properties everywhere. There's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that you never read, you never see, you never play, you never experience, that are there. Or at least your suspension of disbelief should allow you to be like, yeah, that could possibly happen. Ellie was driven so much by the revenge, but in the end she realized that it was consuming her and it didn't matter. And it's the way that people who are so pissed off about this game should not matter. And I am, I guess, going to mention this. I saw a video the other day where somebody was championing that PewDiePie was speaking for the audience for the game. And his thoughts, he had a bunch of stupid, bogus thoughts, in my opinion. I used to love the guy. I loved his playthrough of the original game, but I stopped watching him years ago when he stopped being a gaming channel and became a meme channel and became a channel that was edgelord bullshit. But some guy did a long video talking about how PewDiePie was kind of like the voice of the gamers in terms of this. Oh, the writing is bad. These people wouldn't do this kind of stuff. How the fuck do you know? You don't write these characters. You're not the writer and the creator of this game. These characters could have came out here at the end and they could have been running around in Sonic costumes going, I gotta go fast. Who gives a shit? Whoever writes the game gets to decide that. If you don't like it, fine. March your happy little ass out. Stop playing the game, put it down, be like, I don't like the game, it wasn't for me, and go about your life. Stop promoting all this bullshit of like death threats to developers, and if you like this game, you're stupid, and you're not very smart because you're not getting the writing. I don't give a shit if I get the writing or not on a game like this. I either like it, I don't. I mean, I can have a game that's, it's kind of okay. I love this game. I hated the game. I didn't play more than an hour. You can have all kinds of different thoughts like that. But to start slandering the people who make it, the people who wrote it, the people who do like it, I'm done with that. Another big reason why I'm kind of done with gaming in general. Everybody's on the internet with their opinion. Here I am with mine. But everybody's on the internet with their opinion that's harmful and toxic and cancer and all the other words that people say. Like I said, I understand. I'm another one of the voices out here, blah, 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 disseminating my stuff out. Nobody's really going to see this and nobody's really going to care. But games are getting to be... I have, right now, no job, no money, almost no nothing. Thankfully, I have some stuff coming along. I'm going to survive, obviously. But games are almost the only thing that I have. Look at all this shit back here. Games and movies and stuff. I don't have a girlfriend or no prospects. I've been divorced and single for 11 years. I'm a pretty lonely, depressing individual in a lot of ways. I have lots of great friends who I love. Some of you are going to watch this. Hi, guys. I love you. But like, this is almost all that I have. And I still know that there's a difference between this thing and the fucking real world. And you don't have to get so goddamn caught up in video games that you treat people like shit like that. Sorry, this was just supposed to be my top games of 2020. But at the same time, I did want this to be a chance to kind of talk about this game. Because goddamn, it's so damn divisive with people, and there's no reason for it to be. There's no reason to take people down, to tear them apart, because they killed a character in a video game that you liked. There's no reason to call people shitty game developers and shitty writers because you didn't like the story that they came up with. There's no reason for it. It's not needed. It's not. Alright guys, so that's going to be it. My top 6 games of 2020. When we get to the end of 2021, I'll probably make a video like this about my favorite games from 2021, but it's not looking like there's going to be a lot of this year's releases that I'll be playing this year, so that hopefully will be a shorter video and with less contempt. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.